Welcome to the Pushing Beauty podcast. This is Michelle Diavella, and these are words from my soul. Last night I was messaging some girlfriends a link to a YouTube video, and a friend of mine wrote back and said something about me being the resource fairy queen, and I was joking that I should start another blog called Resource Fairy Queen or something along those lines. And a lot of my friends sort of tease me about this, that I constantly have different resources and information and things that I'm sharing. And one of the things that I was doing yesterday was writing down a list of things that I really love. And I recognize that I really love reading. I really love taking in information from transformational teachers, speakers, spiritual teachers, really a range of things. I love learning. I've always loved learning and growing since I was very young. So I decided, I don't have a really great platform for sharing some of these things. So I thought last night, well, maybe I could share it on the podcast, and it would be just really tiny episodes about things that are inspiring me or things that I'm reading. So what I'm going to start with is a series of what I'm reading. I don't know what I'm going to call it. Maybe it'll be current reads or what I'm currently reading, something super inspiring like that. So anyways, I don't know if anybody's doing anything like this. Doesn't really matter. I'm just going to have this be a little place where I'm going to share the things that I'm reading, and then maybe later on it'll also be people that inspire me, and articles and maybe videos and things like that as well. But for right now, I'm just going to start with the books that I'm reading that are really inspiring me, and I think that I'll probably do one book per episode. This episode, the first episode, is going to be 2 books because they're written by the same author. And I haven't finished reading them yet. I'm in the midst, but I kind of feel like being in the midst of it is when you're most excited. So I think that's what I'm going to start to talk about. So the first book that I'm reading is called Medical Medium by Anthony William. And the second book that I'm reading at the same time is called Life-Changing Foods, also by Anthony William. So if you're not familiar with Medical Medium, he is obviously a medical medium, which for those of you who don't know what that means is a person who is essentially channeling or communicating with, I guess you would say, spirit, depending on the person. He says that he's communicating with spirit, and he also says that he is the only person that's communicating with this particular spirit on the planet. So right away, based off of this information, you're going to know whether this is for you or not. This is going to cut some people out right away who maybe are not interested in this kind of thing. This is probably not for you. I would really encourage you, though, if you have any type of mystery illness, to hang in there, even if this doesn't totally resonate with you or fit in your paradigm. I'm really open to this kind of thing, and it really deeply resonates with me, more so just what he's speaking about. But I will give a little bit of a background into how this happened to him, so how he became a medium. So he shares his story in the book Medical Medium, that he was 4 years old, woke up one morning and heard a voice as if somebody was whispering in his ear that said something like, "I am spirit of the Most High. The only spirit higher is God." Something like that. And he's 4 years old, so he has no idea what's going on. And I think later that day, he's having dinner with his family, and there's a man who's standing behind his grandmother, and he realizes that nobody else can see this man. And the man asks him, I think gestures for him to go walk over and stand next to his grandmother. And so he does. And he puts his hand on his grandmother's chest where this man is pointing to. And the man says, "Say lung." And so he says lung. And then he says, say lung cancer. And so he says lung cancer. And then he says, say grandma has lung cancer. And so he says grandma has lung cancer. And everybody looks at him like, what the heck is going on? Remember, he's 4 years old, has no idea what lung cancer is. And the man walks up some imaginary steps and disappears out the ceiling and turns to him and says, you will probably never see me again, but you will hear me every single morning. And so for every single day, I don't know how old he is. He's probably in his, I'm very bad with ages, so I don't know, probably in his late 40s, something like that, mid 40s. So every single morning he hears, I am the spirit of the Most High, the only spirit higher is God. And not only that, he then began to train him, the spirit began to train Anthony to be able to medically diagnose people. And the story is really remarkable. It's the first several pages of the book. So even if you're interested in this and you're maybe a little skeptical, you could go into a bookstore and just read this portion. It's really remarkable. I'm not going to share all of it here, but many different things happened to him in his life. He wants to kill himself at a certain point, of course, because could you imagine living like this? He gives the example, imagine trying to go on a date. And you go to the movies and you're in the theater, and when you walk into the movie theater, you can see the medical diagnosis of every single person in the theater. It's like he has x-ray vision and can see their everything that's like basically physically wrong with them. And then you watch the movie, and on screen you can see the medical diagnosis of every single person at the time that they filmed the movie and at the present time. So obviously it's very disruptive to your life. There's no way to essentially be quote unquote normal. And so eventually he got to the point, he had a near-death experience with himself and his dog, and spirit intervened. And it was when he decided to surrender to dedicating his life to helping people heal. So this book is really, really important for anyone who has mystery illness. And I actually know several people who do. And when I'm talking about mystery illness, it's people, and I'm sure you know somebody or know someone who knows somebody, people who have been to a million different doctors trying to figure out what's going on. And that has been me to a degree. Thankfully, I haven't had anything very, very serious, but I've had different health issues. I had acne issues my whole life until I started doing breath work. And even still, it's not completely cleared up, but dramatically better through doing breath work. But I've worked with so many different types of doctors and kinds of healing modalities. I've probably done almost every different type of diet possible. So he's speaking about very specific things. He gets into depression. He gets into menopause, which I just read that chapter last night, which is really fascinating because he says that it's menopause and hormone issues. So he's a big advocate for women's health because apparently menopause didn't exist before the 1950s. Women didn't have menopausal symptoms. So menopause is not, it's not meant to, you're not meant to have hot flashes and whatever else kinds of negative physical experiences happen in having menopause. There's a slew of interesting information that he speaks about, like radiation poisoning, basically. So in the 1950s, there was an x-ray machine that was created. It was unregulated, and it was put in shoe department stores. And women were going, on weekends to try on shoes. They would use this x-ray machine, even with little children, as sort of this fun thing to put your feet in when you were trying on shoes. You put your feet in the x-ray machine and they could see your bones. And so they were claiming that this would enable you to purchase shoes that fit you better so you wouldn't have to buy shoes as often. It was completely ridiculous. And basically people got incredibly overexposed to radiation. Another example he gives is DDT, which is a chemical that was, I think, used in the 1950s and marketed as like a health benefit. They were going door to door and spraying DDT on an apple and saying, "Here you go. It has nutritional benefits as well." They had like ice cream trucks, but DDT trucks going through neighborhoods, and kids were bathing themselves in the suds of the DDT. So there's some really important things to be aware of in terms of our history and what we understand as being, what's actually harmed our bodies. And this book really goes into the medical industry and the inability for doctors to say, "I don't know," and instead diagnose people with things like Candida, which I have also been diagnosed with in the past, and did a lot of research about that as well. There's a lot of misinformation. A lot of people are really confused. What I really love about, obviously, this approach is that it's not a theory. It's a spiritual guidance system, I guess you would say. So obviously you have to be somebody who buys into this stuff, quote unquote, buys into. It's not the way that I really perceive it, but it's a model that really fits my life and my experience and resonates deeply with me. So there's a lot of answers that he has about what's actually plaguing people, and Epstein-Barr virus is actually a really big one. And he also has plenty of examples in the books of really incredible illnesses people have had and how they've healed themselves through very specific fruits, vegetables, plants, and minerals. The second book that I'm reading is called Life-Changing Foods, and these are 40 of those foods that he is specifically recommending to essentially change your life. And I am in love with this book. So the first book, Medical Medium, goes into all of the different, Hashimoto's, hypothyroiditis, so thyroid issues, Candida, depression. I'm blanking on some of the other ones, but a lot of, like I said, menopause. There's a lot of different illnesses that people are being diagnosed with. I'm just trying to look in the book right now and see if I can. Multiple sclerosis, rheumatoid arthritis, diabetes, adrenal fatigue, migraines, shingles, PTSD, which is huge. So this is really relating to the work that I do with breath work, but he also mentions that most people have some form of PTSD, which I definitely agree with. So a really, really interesting book. Highly, highly suggest checking it out. He also has a podcast. I think that the book is more compelling personally than the podcast, but the podcast is also great as well, in my opinion. So back to Life-Changing Foods. So as soon as I opened this book, I was loving it, and I didn't really know too much. I also found Anthony William through Instagram somehow, one of those random things that you find somebody, and I kept seeing different fruits being posted. And at the time, my breathwork teacher had recommended that I do a liver cleanse because I was working through a lot of deep-seated anger stuff that was going on in my body. And I kept seeing on Medical Medium's Instagram a couple of things about liver cleansing. And so he had 5 specific things. A couple of them are cilantro, I think barley juice powder, spirulina from Hawaii, wild blueberries, and a type of seaweed, which I'm blanking on the exact kind. So those are the main things that he says. And so I had just purchased those without even really reading anything about him. And I was just starting to have them from time to time, but I didn't really know what I was doing. So I had done a different liver cleanse. I had just come off a 40-day cleanse about a month and a half ago, where I did no sugar for 40 days, no wheat for 30 days, no caffeine for 30 days, no alcohol. A really great parasite cleanse, actually. And coming off of that, I felt really compelled to look more into the medical medium, specifically because I grind my teeth and I'm trying to find a resolution to that, which has been very challenging as well. And he doesn't have a lot of information about that right now. So if that's something that you're struggling with, I will keep you posted as I'm on this journey. But the book Life Changing Foods I bought because it's two of his books. It looks sort of like a cookbook, but what it is it does have some recipes, but he basically breaks down the foods that Spirit has told him are healing and how they actually heal, what they specifically, what symptoms they heal, what illnesses they heal, how they support us emotionally, and then each one has a spiritual lesson. So I read a couple of these and I was blown away. I felt so deeply connected to the way that these fruits actually, well, all of the different things, fruits, vegetables, plants, and minerals, the way that these things are actually healing our bodies. So I've been very interested in clean eating for quite some time. Like I was saying before, I eat fairly clean. I'm a conscious eater. I try to eat as organic as possible. You know, I have a food podcast would be like a whole other topic kind of on belief systems around food and stuff, which would be really interesting. But really all of this to say that I have been very aware of my food and I do a lot of healing work. And I've been really wanting something to feel like it deeply resonates with me. And this really does. This approach really does. So as I was reading, I was just recognizing specifically when he talks about fruits because, and I didn't really realize this until now I'm becoming so aware. He talks a lot about this fruit fear and that he's trying to like kind of bust this idea that fruit is not good for you. So people are getting really confused about not having sugar and thinking that fruit sugar is bad for you. And I'm seeing it everywhere now, especially in relationship to the paleo diet. And so he really talks a lot about that. But as I was reading, I think about oranges, I was just imagining how fruit is literally just Mother Earth is like just plopping the fruit down into our hands, right? Like oranges fall from trees, apples fall from trees, banana, I don't even know how you call it, but they're like the stalks of banana, like the bananas, they'll fall down. So it's essentially as if we're being handed, rather than we're cooking all these different food, we're baking things, we're adding sugar to it. There's just so much, and it's not about not eating some of these other things, but it's really about incorporating certain foods into our diets that are essentially healing us. So one of the really incredible foods that he speaks about is wild blueberries. And wild blueberries are very interesting. And what I also love about this book is that he brings in the energetic essence of the fruits and the plants and vegetables. So he's speaking about how wild blueberries are incredibly healing because they're resilient. So I think in Maine, he says those are the best wild blueberries to get. So in Maine, I guess wild blueberries get burnt down for some reason. I don't know if there's like a lot of different wildfires or something in the summers, but when they're burnt down, they're like literally burnt to a crisp, and they will actually grow back on their own without human intervention at all. And they grow back with a vengeance. So he talks about that resilience, resiliency actually being a huge part of how they're able to heal us. And they're also even more resilient. That energy comes out even more when they're frozen. So having frozen wild blueberries actually is almost more of a potent healing quality. There are so many more incredible stories and information about each type of fruit, plant, and vegetable that he talks about. I'm going through them sort of slowly, but really starting to integrate things based off of how my body's feeling. So, for example, I have a little bit of eczema. I listened to one of his podcasts on eczema and skin issues, and I'm beginning to incorporate certain types of fruits into my diet that really help support that healing. I really feel like it's about incorporating much more consistently. And he even says that when it comes to his liver cleanse, those 5 things that I was speaking about earlier, cilantro and wild blueberries, spirulina of Hawaii. It's about having, I think, 3 of those in your bloodstream, I guess, within 24-hour period of time every single day. So you don't have to necessarily have all 5 of those every single day, but you want to have a couple of those and keep kind of swapping them out. So I'm just starting to work with this. I'm feeling really, really, really good, very energized, much more in tune with my body. I feel like I'm nourishing myself in a completely different way. And interestingly enough, I'm starting to see this pop up everywhere. I just had my Akashic records read the other day by somebody who came to a breathwork circle of mine, and I walked into her home and I looked over onto, I guess it was her desk, and the one book that was sitting there was Medical Medium, and she had just started reading it. So I highly suggest checking it out if any of this resonates with you at all. I also read tons of different kinds of books. Some of the ones that are coming up that I'm currently reading that I'm going to share with you guys later, the Indigenous Peoples' History of the United States. So very, very different topic, obviously. I am also reading Mark Nepo's book of poetry, Mary Oliver book of essays, and I'm reading Gabby Bernstein's The Universe Has Your Back. So I'll be keeping you posted on some of those in the future as well. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I will see you next time.